Welcome to the Enviroo Circularity Series podcast. On today's session, we'll be talking about the importance of stakeholder alignment for the success of DRS. I'm delighted to have my esteemed guests, Dr. Adam Reed, Chief Sustainability and External Affairs Officer at Suez UK, Alice Harlock, Director and Technical Member of OPRL Limited, and Ian Smith, Business Development Manager at Machinex.
Ian Smith, Business Development Manager for Machinex in the UK. Been working with Machinex for about 8 years. Obviously very much focused on equipment, recycling systems. So as far as DRS goes, we kind of get what we're given. We have to deal with what comes out, whatever people say. I guess what we've done majorly is we built a sorting centre outside Montreal, because it's all right collecting the material, you've got to do something with it. So we're actually collecting it, baling it, recounting it and shipping it off our own market. Because once you have all these bags of material, you've got to do something with it. So we're very much focused on that, which is why we've kind of come into this off the back of machinery.
Great.
So I'm Alice Harlock. I'm Director of Technical and Member Services at OPRL. If you don't know us, we put the recycling labels on packaging. So we work with retailers and brands. And I guess ultimately what we're trying to do is help us as consumers do the right thing with our packaging when we're finished with it. So simple, straightforward, easy to understand messaging. But making sure we understand what influences the recyclability of packaging. So being conscious of what's being used on the market, how is it going to be collected and sorted, and where does it go at the end of its journey, basically, to be reused.
Great. Thanks, Alice.
Okay.
So I'm last. Dr. Adam Reed. I'm the Chief Sustainability and External Affairs Officer with Suez in the UK. So we are a waste and resource management company. We're post-consumer, post-business. When stuff gets put in the bin, what happens to it? We help segregate it, sort it, recycle it, treat it, and ultimately dispose of it. And I guess from a DRS perspective, we've operated elements of a DRS delivery solution in other parts of the world, particularly France. So we've got insight into what happens to the material in particular. And I think in the UK, we're quite worried that there's a lot of policy reform happening at the same time. And so how does our infrastructure, the recycling sites in particular, and the vehicles have to change when you've got some materials coming in and some materials going out? So at the moment, we're very much in understanding the likely changes and then planning for those in terms of our investment portfolio.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, leading on from that, Adam, can you talk a bit about what's been done in France, what's been successful? And I think it would be helpful if, Alice, you share some of your challenges consumers have faced with understanding all the packaging, because I think it's all about simplicity and messaging. So given that there's two policies going live at the same time, which is going to get the airtime and how's it actually going to be implemented?
As a business that's operated or worked in and around DRS in a number of different jurisdictions, I think the first lesson I think we've learned is DRS works really well when introduced in areas where you don't have a uniform widespread curbside collection program, because you've got a ready and willing set of consumers who want to do more, and you're giving them a very easy route to get those additional materials back into the system. The worry in the UK market would be that my mum's had a curbside recycling scheme for 20 odd years. She's got a very ingrained set of behaviours, and the idea that next year she suddenly has to take half the material out to go somewhere else is something that we've not faced in France, and we've not faced it in Scandinavia, where we also operate. And that's from an operator's perspective. I think having some kind of potential confusion at the curbside, not only with customers, the general public, but also with businesses who are just being asked to put a load of new material out for regular collection for recycling. That's the uncertainty, and that's the area that we're still working on, is what's likely to happen. Where's that material likely to end up? How many people are really going to do what the government think they're going to do?
I think that's a really good point. Sorry, just to jump in. I think there's a couple of things that are going on at the same time, like you said. So one of the big things that we know, the reasons why people aren't recycling, is because they get confused. They don't know what they're meant to be doing in their area. They don't know what they're meant to be doing with this particular piece of packaging. And what we've been working towards over the years is making that simpler for people, which is where simpler recycling obviously comes in. We've got this standard set of materials that are going to be collected through our household collections, which is great, really helpful. The challenge with DRS is that we're then adding in a new thing that we've got to start be doing. And it's with material that we've been recycling at home for a long time. And I'm not saying it's not going to work. I think we just need to be so clear with the communication. we need to make sure that it's not just us as householders know what we've got to do, but like you say, all the businesses, we all need to know how we play our part and how we do it to get it right. And that's the really critical thing. I remember when I was weaning my boys, so when they were learning to eat proper food, someone told us a baby has to try a food 15 times before you decide whether they don't actually like it.
I don't know that.
So you give them a piece of broccoli, they pull a face. You have to keep going 15 times, which gets painful, obviously. And then you say, okay, that's not going to work. And I think it's the same with the messaging. We've got to be consistent, but we've got to keep at it.
I think that's the thing we've seen looking at what we're doing in the UK and also what we've done in Canada, is it's the mixed messages. It's like, well, we're recycling this material at the moment. It's going to a facility. It's being recycled. As you both say, we've got a collection service at home that's been going forever. Everybody can go out their back door, put it in the right bin now, because most people have got multiple bins, so they know where it needs to go. And go, well, why do I need to take that out? So people are going to focus on, well, actually, it's worth some money to me. So this becomes very much a money-driven thing rather than a recycling. It's got nothing to do with we'd like to recycle more. They'll go, well, if I keep all of this in a bag and go to a machine, I'll get X pounds back, and we do it that way.
But I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because helps people recognise the value actually in this material that they've got.
It's going to become a currency.
Yeah.
It will become a currency, and the question then is how well is that communicated, and how, in such a multicultural, fast-paced society that we are now, what touch points are going to be there to make it easy for people?
And I think that for me, the difficulty is who's going to communicate it. Because is it government-led? Is it the delivery body that's going to be responsible for this? Is it going to be the brands themselves? Because a lot of the emphasis on communications around materials and recycling historically has gone back to local authorities as the one touch point that every household kind of gets. And I worry that this is beyond local government engagement. If you're asking the public to stop doing things, not because you've taken the service away locally, then I think somebody else is responsible. And ultimately it's the brands, because it's their material. But are we expecting the Coca-Colas of this world to really do that campaigning? Because without it, we're going to have a huge period of transition that may not work as well as we all hope.
One of the things I think is really important with this as well is that what we're hoping to expect out of a DRS scheme is realistic. I think, and I don't know, I'll hold my hand up, I don't know what the targets are that are being set, whether there's targets set already, but certainly looking at, what's come out of the scheme in Ireland, they're getting a good capture rate, but there's still a chunk of material that's going through the MRFs because it's going through the standard household recycling. So I think we've got to be ambitious, but not too ambitious, and then also be prepared that wherever we're aiming for, we won't get there straight away, and that doesn't matter. It's a journey, isn't it?
Big question is that where is the material being processed, and is there a backlash on that? I've not read anything, but ultimately it's a much smaller country. People, when this is rolled out in England, when people realise actually I've gone out my way and packed to the supermarket, and actually it's now still been exported. Do you think that's going to completely collapse a DRS system in terms of consumer trust?
The thing we found is we make shipping container size places where you can go. They put them in a car park at a superstore, which is great, But in the UK, you'd turn up with something the size of a shipping container and want power to it and all this. That's not going to happen. And all of a sudden, we've experienced it. When you have bottle banks and closed banks, you go to put stuff in and they're full because they're not serviced, because they fill up faster than people expect. So if you get a machine that you go to and it's full and you've got a bag in the back of your car, you're going to go, well, I can take these home and put them in I can't be bothered. And I think what's going to incentivise people is the people that recycle now will still do the same material they've always recycled, whether they do it for DRS. So you're not going to increase the volume. It's the people who don't do anything. You're trying to increase the volume or take it out of the black bin and try and recover a bit more. But, if you go to, the same man, if you go to a good recycling facility, you can almost get food grade material out of that. That's doable. So if you've got a facility where your bin goes and it's food grade material, what as a nation are we gaining? Nothing. It's. I mean, we said before, DRS is like Christmas. It's going to happen and it's coming. We just got to kind of make it work. That's it. Everyone's got to go. Well, as long as it's
going to disappoint. That's the question.
But it's got to be. I guess put out to everybody in the same way, so everyone understands what they're doing. Because people, of course there'll be these machines with a hole in the wall, or you can take a bag somewhere. Well, but that needs to be set up before it starts, and then also where do those bags go to be? So all that's got to be done. You know, you kind of have to start at the bottom end. Where does all this material go back to recycle, and then come backwards? And you need to start now.
So I think the question about markets is, I mean, it's a valid question, but based on the assumption that this material is going to be better quality than through some of the curbside collections that are currently out there, because you do see, you know, very varying quality depending on how you capture and what bin bag box, you know, mix you use. So I think you'll be cherry picking, because the reprocessors will be able to get really good quality through DRS. I think that's one thing we would all, you know, pretty much bank on, is the quality of the material will be as high, if not better, than the best curbside systems. Notwithstanding the fact that we've got MRFs that can handle that mix now.
But it's a small percentage.
It is. Yeah. So I don't think what we find is that material being collected through other channels may find it harder to get away. So those lower grade plastics that aren't part of DRS, they might be an issue going into market, just because the current infrastructure is full with new material coming through DRS if it takes off as quickly as government would like. But I think, you know, Ian's point's, you know, really valid. I think the back end recycling piece is probably not where my biggest concern is.
Right.
It's all those reverse vending machines that we need to import, build, install. It's all the, you know, the skips, for want of a better phrase, that are going to be intelligent. That's a massive offering. And at the moment, the one thing you can guarantee as a resident of the UK, you get a collection from your door at least once a week, every week, of materials. So this is a massive step change. Whatever happens, it's a big infrastructure shift.
Yeah. I mean, how many machines do you think we'd need? I mean, what sort of volumes and figures are we? I mean, how much did you roll out in Quebec?
It's, at the moment, around the Montreal, that area of Quebec, we've got 400 stations there, and that's growing all the time. I mean, and yet that as a nation has got about 5 million people.
Right.
You know, the thing is, you've got the space for. I mean, we do like we said, we do the shipping containers and the bigger ones where you can take in refillable bottles and hand them in. But we've got the units where it's not just a hole in the wall. You just tip a bag onto a small conveyor, it goes through, counts it, gives you a ticket. You then go and cash that in. Happy days, you know. So someone can. I think someone said to me, the worst thing with a bag full of bottles, you'll collect them all in your garage, which is great, but all the cans all leak out. So this bag becomes a nice sort of sticky mess, and you've got to put your hand in and do it one at a time into a machine. Whereas if you can just empty this bag, tip it onto the thing, and put the bag in the bin next to it, take this ticket away. But if there's anything in there that's not correct, or doesn't matter, because it just goes through, it doesn't spit it back out, and you have to take it away.
Sure.
And that's kind of where it's you know, you've got to make this easy for people, or they'll go, that's a lot of hard work.
I agree.
I was going to say similar, I think, and that's one of the things we need, and I don't know again where we're at in this journey, but with the installation of these RVMs, there needs to be like a blueprint of these are the things you also need to have, like a waste bin, a rubbish bin, you know, so you can put your bags in, or the things that don't scan, or, you know, make sure it's nice and accessible so that someone's got a pram or they're in a wheelchair, they can get to it, or that the staff know it's going to be filled up on a regular basis, so don't just leave it for a week and so it gets full, or wherever it is. It's all of that stuff.
Well, you're going to need several park benches, because, you know, if people are going to start queuing, you know, at your RVMs, I mean, and that's a reality here, isn't it? I mean, when are consumers going to be taking this stuff back when they go to the shop? So you already know about footfall at some of these big, you know, likely RVM locations. I do worry that, you know.
But do you see that in other countries? Because we've done no significant trials to justify whether there's going to be queues or not. So do we really think that's the case? Let's take the Canary Wharf DRS machine, which doesn't have any of the things that you've described, and it doesn't even work. So do we really think there's going to be queues of people without actually testing?
You'll find some areas. There'll be some areas where it's really popular. There'll be a certain supermarket where the demographic in the area is going to have a big difference. You know, if you've got a demographic of people that are used to recycling, they go, well, I can do, because you know, it's not just going to get the cash back. You can have the option to donate whatever this is to some sort of charity or some. So, you know, that's what will engage 20% of the people. They'll go, this is great. But you'll have a lot of people going to this one space. And I mean, we've done the ones where you have like you actually have a card that lets you into the door, so you can go into a room half the size of this, and then you do it, because otherwise you stood out in the rain. And also, and some of these, if you're going to start giving people a ticket back or give them any money back, there's going to be people waiting around.
But do you think the retailers are prepared to have that space? You know, you go to Aldi in Germany, they've got that special room where you go in and it's all dedicated. But
who's going to pay for it? You know, if I mean, take Pepsi or Coca-Cola as an example. If you want to get a lot of cans back and they say, well, we're getting this back, then, you know, the retailer is going to say, well, you want X square meters and you want X amount of power and someone to keep this tidy. That's going to cost you X per year. Yeah. And they'll have to import, you know, sort of take that into their costs. I think that's the issue is, like Adam said at the beginning, we've got a great system that works now. You're now asking us to do something that's going to cream off the nice bit at the top. But who really wants to get involved?
I think the thing about RVMs generally is you either go with them very, very local, and in which case you've got lots of stores and lots of banks on the street almost. But then that's lots of pickup points. That's lots of investment. Or you go bigger retail outlets. But the retail outlets are, you know, the UK is a dense environment.
Yeah.
The one thing we're not good at is space, and so therefore I think there's a real cost impact kind of discussion to be had about what's the best balance of site location to public access to cost of installation. And I think at the moment I'm yet to see that open, honest conversation about how many do we really need and where's the right locations to make sure that 90% of the British public have got access easily. And that's I guess the lack of data or the lack of discussion on that is the worry when we're like literally, you know, months away from some very big decisions being made from an investment point of view.
And has anyone even thought about the actual road impacts of these collections? So you just take London and tube strikes and you know, the struggles today. Imagine it's now got another, you know, 1,000 RVMs just in one area. I don't know what figures will be. And the collection points, the additional traffic to collect all of that. And I don't think that's been thought about.
Well, there must be some, I was going to say, there must be research learnings from other countries, though. You know, I know we're not doing it the same way that other countries have done it, but people have introduced DRS schemes. I mean, just looking at what they've done in Ireland, and I appreciate their collection system is different, but still they've managed to introduce, there must be things that we can take from what other people have done to give an understanding of what.
But you come back to Adam's point at the beginning. Do you go for rural areas that don't have the same? Because I mean, if you go to any of the out of town shopping areas, you go there at the weekend, you struggle to find a car parking space. Yeah. So you know,
not giving up
the prospect of even just trying to get in there with a van to get to this machine to get back out is going to be an effort.
Yeah.
So I think it's, you know, you've got to kind of go, well, the city centres are no-goes for vehicles almost, you know, this sort of thing. So you've got to go, well, actually, and do you do the whole thing regionally? Do you actually say, well, okay, we're going to do this UK-wide, but let's start with the county?
But then are you going to regionally charge people for their deposit? Because this is a mandatory fee that everyone has to pay. So, actually, you know, if you live in the northwest, you'll be charged 20p, but because we've got the system here, but everybody else gets off. That's not going to. How's that going to work?
But you've got to decide how you're going to collect the material and deal with the material. The money thing is kind of almost, you know, do you actually start the whole thing off? Where you don't pay for it to start with, and then you introduce the costs as you actually see where it's going.
But where's the incentive then?
Well, there isn't. That's the problem. You've got to catch 22.
Yeah.
I mean, it needs to work from day one. Otherwise, it will be heavily criticised. But equally, making it work from day one with a big bang introduction with very little. I mean, most curbside recycling schemes have had a trial or a pilot somewhere. Yeah. You look at what's been going with flexible plastics recently. Huge report on lots of different local authority geographies, understanding what worked and what didn't. The one thing we've got with DRS is none of that's in a similar situation to the UK.
And any studies that have been used to develop aren't comparable to what our systems are like. So
there's a huge risk here.
Yeah.
At a time when you're asking the public to recycle more materials weekly at home and all businesses to do the same, that's the risk for me, is we're asking for more and now we're adding complexity.
Adding complexity, but still not also addressing the capacity gap for reprocessing it domestically. So it kind of... And I'm surprised that a DMO has been set up with such a narrow focus of stakeholders. None of us have had a direct dialogue yet, I don't think.
No.
For a campaign or a policy that's been launched, 2027, it's not far off.
No.
And when I had a conversation with one of the brands, and they'll remain nameless, the capacity gap discussion was a complete shock. Oh, we didn't realise that was a problem. And so, it just seems like we're in disparate worlds here, two parallel universes.
So do you introduce DRS at everyone's home? So you give them another bin just to put that material in. So put your DRS material in that bin.
But then you've got the whole digital DRS option,
Yeah.
which there has been a trial on. And that's certainly a growing area, isn't it?
But again, that trial's in a lovely little bubble where everybody wants to work together, live happily ever after. And that's not your inner streets of London or some of your deprived areas in Glasgow. It doesn't cover. No. It's not representative.
Yeah.
And again, Wales comes back to the conversations. Wales, Ireland and Scotland, their populations aren't comparable to 60 million people.
I mean, the other thing with that is in some of these with the bottles and the cans, they have to go in perfect condition so that the bottle can scan it.
Yeah.
Whereas the way we've done it with the bulk one, some of those can be squashed and flattened because it's using AI and visual, so it just recognises, yes, that's a PET bottle, yes, that's an aluminium can.
So that technology, just so I'm clear, is, you know, when you go to a Uniqlo store, when you just drop your clothes into the basket, it scans everything and you just pay. Is that the similar process? It scans. It
literally, as it passes under the scanner, it will count the number of plastic bottles, it will count the number of Tetra Paks if you want to do that, it will count the aluminium cans, and it can do glass bottles, and it just counts them, and then you get a price per, then it will print you out a ticket.
So is it recognising the format of the packaging then, rather than looking for a barcode or anything?
Yeah, it's not looking, because it's not looking for a barcode, because the trouble is that's when you go on the little tunnels where it goes, it spins round, so you've got recogniser. This just literally looks at it on a conveyor belt.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's. I mean, you can do. I mean, it will do 600 units a minute.
Okay. Cool.
So and so if you turn up with 3 or 4 bags, you're out in half a minute.
Yeah.
You stood there with 3 or 4 bags. You've been there for an hour.
Yeah.
And I mean that it's really interesting because it's the kind of the AI learning capability, isn't it? That's now happening. Our sector over the last 4 or 5 years has seen so many of these trials of new kit at our MRFs and in our sorting centres. The technology is out there to do this. But the question is, because you raised the point about, is there enough processing capacity? Well, I'm interested in how much additional tonnage you think there's going to be. Because all the analysis says we're going to get 1 or 2% recycling points in total. Well, why are we spending all this time for 1 or 2% recycling points when simpler recycling alone was going to give you an extra 10 to 12?
Yep.
So again, I don't think the processing capacity is the limiting factor here.
No, I agree, but it's one of many factors that hasn't been thought about.
But I think the thing is the aluminium and the clear PET are probably the most if you take HDPE bottles as well, are the most recyclable material there is.
Totally.
So you've probably got a very high percentage of that already going through the system, already going back for recycling.
Yeah.
And you go, well, let's target that and we'll get it better quality. Well, let's just improve what you have. I mean, we're not saying it won't work and you can't do it, but we're doing this now. This is all happening very quickly, and there's a lot of building blocks to put in place.
In the programs you've set up abroad, who's been the kind of key stakeholders driving the decisions, the process, procedures? I mean, we talked about the brands. Are Coca-Cola going to be shouting off the rooftop about communication, or will it be other organisations? How's it done?
The one we did was the EEQ. It's almost like it's the government body in Quebec. They decided that's what they wanted to do.
Right.
So
it's a bit like, say, DEFRA or LARAC or someone saying in the UK, right, we're going to do this and this is going across, so we'll come and talk to you to see if you can set this system up. So it's not the brand owners, it's actually the government saying, let's get hold of this and make it happen.
State governments in Australia or national governments in Europe have been the key drivers. But those bodies that they've set up have often been heavily brand focused because ultimately they're financing it. So those state governments may have done a lot of the early engagement, because I think there's still a huge amount of the public who would expect to hear that messaging from a state organisation rather than a brand. But over time, those brands have started to become much more vocal because ultimately they need the material back.
I think when I think about it from a consumer or a householder point of view, actually what we need is messaging that's coming from different places, but that messaging is going to have to be different. The message that you might see on your plastic bottle is going to be different to the message you get from your council who's saying, your collection is changing. We no longer want these, but we do really. You've got to say these somewhere else. And that's the real challenge, that we've got to say the same thing, but in different ways to people to get that message across.
Because people ask me, so if I don't do that. Can I still put it in my recycling bin?
Yeah.
Well, yes, you can. So I can just, on a rainy day, I can just go out and I can still put it in the same bin and it will still get collected.
But I think we need to
Yeah.
then understand what that means. And this is one of my things. I've worked in recycling for a while, seasoned veteran, as you called me.
How long's a while?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
and,
let's not play that game.
one of the things that people always say when you talk to them about recycling is, I want to understand what goes on. I want to understand where my material's going, what happens to it. And then they say, but I don't want you to tell me all in one go. I want you to tell me in lots of little bits, which is very challenging. It's almost painting that picture. It's being really clear on what's happening to that material. And I think it's the same with the kind of the reprocessing. Okay, some of the material might have to go elsewhere. Does it matter? If we give them the full story and understand why and what's happening, does it matter if that's what's happening to it at the moment? This is the start of a journey.
Yeah. I think the point about the rainy day and do I put it in my recycling box or not, I think is a really interesting one, because you'd like to think the system could cope. But actually, if we're redesigning our collection systems because we know these materials are not meant to be there, because they're going to end up in DRS, but we've now got to collect flexible plastics, suddenly you're reconfiguring your collection vehicles. My MRFs are being reconfigured as we speak, so the recycling sites, because they recognise that these materials are going to drop and these materials are going to increase. The last thing you want is 20 or 30% of your plastic bottles still in the recycling box, because the system that we're designing is designed with that being far less than that in principle, because that's what the expectation is. So I think that transition window has to be quick, and it has to work as expected. Otherwise, you're going to find a lot of material in the wrong place and hard to deal with.
Yeah. You guys have put a lot of schemes and programs in place. How long has stuff taken for consumers to actually adopt and understand packaging, or you're using different bins from your experiences in those? Can you give me some examples? Because I want to understand, is this DRS, will it take years to get people's behaviour to change?
It's back to your 15 times.
Yeah,
Is it going to be
but I think, I mean, it's really hard for me to say. So we started doing recycling labels in 2009. But if you think back to 2009, the landscape for recycling was completely different to what we have now. You know, you could do your glass bottles probably through a bring bank. You'd have garden waste, paper, metal, collected at home. If you were lucky, you might get plastic bottles, but not very many local authorities. You definitely wouldn't be able to put your pots, tubs and trays in. And we're not in that place now. So almost the kind of behaviour has grown as the recycling collections have expanded. And then what we've seen more of is people adopting behaviours like rinsing things out or giving them a clean, putting caps back on. Don't need to worry about that now because that's changed through the EU legislation. But, you know, so it's hard to say, hard to give you a definite answer because we're in a different position, really.
We've rolled out new curbside collection systems when we've inherited contracts. We've also introduced flexible plastic collections in trial areas. So we've got recent experience where you can go, and we've done something different. How long did it take to embed? And I think your 15 kind of messages is probably not a bad, a bad guess, because in reality, you know, half the people get it right within the first couple of collections because they've read the message, you know, they've understood it, and everybody's good. But the other 50% can take time after time after time, because you then realise that they don't get the messages that you were using. You're now reliant on other messages. You're reliant on door-to-door advisors. So it could take 6 to 9 months before you can get most of the people doing it right most of the time. And even then, that's not perfect. But that's the kind of level that most local authority customers of mine would accept, is most of the people, most of the time, reasonable quality.
I mean, we look at it the same way. I said to you before, you know, 20% of the people will do it absolutely perfect straight off the bat. 60% of the people think it's a great idea and they'll do it if it's a nice sunny day and it's easy and they don't have to concentrate. And 20% will just never do it. They'll do whichever is the easiest, whatever you tell them, whatever you promise them.
I think the critical thing is we've got to understand what's going to drive people to do it, and then what are going to be the barriers, and how do you help overcome those barriers, and that's how we make it work. And not just for us who are going to have to be doing it, but for the businesses who have got to take these things in or have got to, you know, change the way they operate. We've got to address all of those, really.
And at the end of the day, it's got to make some money, because otherwise, you know, it's, like you said, something's going to fund this. If the funding doesn't keep up with the costs, it will stop.
Yeah, the system will collapse.
And it's got to be self-funding at least. Otherwise, it just people go, well, we can't afford to do this.
Yeah.
It's like recycling materials. If it costs if it costs you £100 a ton through a system to recycle it and it's worth 10, you're going to do it for about 2 weeks.
Yep.
Then you're going to go, well, we're not doing this anymore because we're not making any money. Well, everything is financially controlled.
Yeah.
If recycling is great, but at the end of the day, it's a business.
Yeah.
So what do you think are some of the kind of key barriers that people might face when this is launched?
So big thing for me is that kind of behaviour change, doing something differently and understanding why I've got to do something differently. I think that's a really critical thing. I mean, I'm going to say the same thing again. I'm sorry I keep repeating myself, but that communication has to be so clear and so easy for people to understand. I think that's one of the things that we've learnt doing what we do. You want your message to be simple and it to be easy, and you want people to be able to look at it and know what they need to do rather than look at it and think, hang on, I don't really understand that. And, it's got to work quickly.
I think off the back of that is it's why we're doing it.
Yeah.
It's right saying, you understand it, great, but why? There's got to be a good reason why people are doing it, and then they'll get on board with how they do it.
And I think when you add to that the accessibility to do it,
Yes.
because it's only going to take a couple of, I'm ready to do it. Oh, hang on, that's out of my way. Or I've got to go back to a shop. I haven't been in a shop for 4 years. That kind of post-COVID kind of new world where everybody's online. I just think if it's not accessible, then the desire to support starts to wane.
And how would you make it accessible?
Well, you tell me, how far are you willing to walk to deposit?
Depends
to
on the
deposit
day.
some,
If
some
I've got my
20p's.
electric car or not. No, exactly. No, it's true. It has to be easy. It has to be like, I'm not going out my way to do something. And that, when it becomes easy, that's what's going to create behavioural change. Yeah. Where it's little bits. I'm just walking out and I've got pinged. I know that there's a RVM just around the corner. I'll do that. Or actually, you know what? My supermarket, I know. Actually, if the supermarkets and various people, it's more interactive. Everyone using apps technology. And that's what we need to be able to do.
And I think if you get that information, then I think you'll get some of the consumers to come across who maybe were undecided. But I think there's a constant battle in my head, my mum's head as benchmarks, which goes, if that takes me a bit of effort, is the reward worth doing? Because if it's going to cost me an extra half an hour to drive out of my way, wait in a queue, and put my 20p's and I make a couple of pounds, I'm weighing up, is my time worth more than the £2 I'm getting back? Particularly for those that aren't regular visitors to supermarkets.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely
Because
right.
I think the public that don't use supermarkets on a weekly basis are the ones that we don't know what their behaviour will be, and we don't know how accessible the trigger point will be. If it's got to be the end of the street, think about the Netherlands, all of their bins are at the end of every street. So they're all used to doing that already. I go to the end of the street, organics, end of the street, plastics, organics, glass. That's a normalised behaviour. How far does my mum go? From the kitchen to the back door.
Yeah. But that's it. I think you're right. It's, like you said, a lot of people do online shopping, and half an hour might even be under it, so it's half an hour of your time. If you're working from home, you don't go out, you do this. I'm going to spend half an hour and go to the shop to get 40p or 50p back. Nah, and that's what you've got to weigh up. People value their time now, which is why a lot of people work from home.
And I think they're the interesting customer group almost, because it's like, so can you provide a community service where the local scouts or Women's Institute or whoever, local school, is providing a service? And I think this is quite an interesting space that's not really been explored. What's the value of? But for me, lots of people, working from home or elderly who aren't going to be going out, getting home deliveries of stuff. And at the moment, I'm not expecting the home delivery bodies to be taking that material away. But long term, reverse logistics suggests they should be part of the solution. So at the moment, could we provide, particularly in the villages, the rural, where that's going to be key for getting that material? Otherwise, I know where it's going. It's going in the recycling box because that's where it's always gone.
Well, we come back to what we said earlier: is do you have a DRS bin at home that your local scouts come and collect once a week? And you do it that way. So okay, fine. there's about 80 pence worth in there. You come and fetch it, you take it away, you tip the bin out, job done, and you're actually giving something to a local charity or event.
I think that's really interesting, and I think it comes down to what do we all want to get out of this? And I think that's one of the really critical things is we've got to appreciate that people will be coming at it from different angles. So for some people, it's about, I want to get that money back. I've paid my extra 20p, I want to get it back. For some people, it won't be for that. They might be doing it because actually they feel that they're doing a better thing. You know, it's a better way of recycling. And so if they can help a local charity, you know, their neighbour's kid who's raising money for the local football club or whatever, then we've just got to be conscious of those different messages and what's gonna drive people to take part.
Because that happens now. People collect aluminium cans for junior football clubs and things like that. So you just
milk
expand
bottle
that.
tops. We all did milk bottle tops for the guide dogs, didn't we?
You're not that old.
I am.
Yeah.
But experience, not
experience.
Experience.
Seasoned veteran.
Seasoned veteran, yeah.
I think actually that's another really interesting point. You know, maybe a lot of us in this room have got memories of what we would class as almost a DRS, you know, Corona bottles, glass milk bottles. And there will be a lot of people in the population who have got a kind of an expectation of what this is going to be. And it's not that. This is something different. And so it's not just we can leave our plastic bottles out on the doorstep and someone will come and pick them up for us. We've got to be really clear on what the expectations are.
I was having a conversation with your food deliveries at home. They said, well, can't the food deliveries take the stuff back? I went, that's fine, but do you want to be the last one where, you know, this van is now full of people's recycling and smelly stuff and your food's in the back corner, you're the last one out? I said, you can't do it in the same vehicle, which means all of a sudden the delivery people are going to have a whole new fleet of vehicles just to collect the package in the following week. It's, you know, and then you go, well, how much is that going to cost? So, okay, well, your delivery for your food, instead of being £5, is now £10.
I think Alex makes a really valid point as well about the current approach not being like the Corona bottles of yesteryear. Because actually, I love the idea of the milk bottle being refilled, washed and refilled. Corona bottles were no different, were they? They were heavy glass. You know, say what you will about carbon footprint, but they went back and, I don't know, 80 or 90% of them were washed and refilled. The model we're going down is a recycling-based approach, not a refillable approach. So, again, I come back to the whole debate, which is we're going to grab a few extra percentage points of target material for an awful lot of infrastructure cost at a time when there's a lot of complexity. If it was refillables, if we were going, you know, proper closed loop, I could maybe buy into it a bit more, but I just think it's a lot of effort for not a lot of gain.
The thing now is a lot of the glass bottles are nowhere near as tough as they used to be.
They're not.
So they're not going to survive. But people, you know, once it's gone back for refill, they get little scuffs and thing on the glass. And people don't want a bottle that looks like it's been used before. They want a nice new shiny one. Right. It's the whole expectation is new and shiny all the time because that's what I'm paying for.
Though I disagree slightly. I mean, I get where you're coming from.
I don't think everyone's like that, but I think there's a lot of people will look at it and go,
But I think it's a question of learning to understand why, you know, if you think about stuff that you see now that's made from recycled plastic, it's grey. It's not necessarily the prettiest, but we are starting to see it and we are kind of getting used to it. So I think we can learn that it doesn't have to be.
How long is that going to take? That's the problem.
It always takes a while, doesn't it? Yeah.
And what are your thoughts? We Adam, we touched on it in a separate conversation around, we were just talking about DRS plastic bottles becoming a currency, depends on the consumer. There was this concept, I think you mentioned bin diving and people that taking place. I mean, how realistic do we think something like that would actually happen in our country if the level of infrastructure is not there? And
I think, it's interesting because, as somebody that worked in Eastern Europe for a long time, people were bin diving because it was a way of life, because that's how they made enough money to feed their children. And I guess in this country, there's all sorts of talk about we'll have, you know, street bins that have got, you know, little perches for you to put, you know, I'm donating that can so that somebody who needs it can grab it. And I've got to be honest, although that conceptually is a nice thing, I'm like, but it could get blown off, you know, the fox might jump up, you know, it might be raining and it gets knocked off. The whole thing just suggests more litter to me and for very little benefit. So are we encouraging the homeless or other marginal groups to wander around city centres capturing what could be enough to buy them a pasty or a cup of coffee? Is that really where government policy should be?
The challenge of on the go recycling is massive, isn't it? It's always been massive. And even with simpler recycling, you know, you look in the new bins that you're getting in places. I went to, am I allowed to name a fast food joint that sells sausage rolls? Greg's.
They'll find you.
Lovely set of bins. I have to applaud Greg's for their set of bins.
Yeah.
What I thought was quite nice labelling, and looked in the bins. I could not tell the difference between which bin was which just from looking, because, you know, people don't
on the go.
know.
They're on the go.
They're going, I'm just going to drop it in there.
M40 service stations, you know, it's become a shopping centre. You've got all these fast food chains, you've got everything, and you look at the bins and there's no difference.
Yeah.
It's very clear. And even your people who, I've seen people with liquid, where it says dispose your liquid in those, just chucking half a can of Pepsi into a bin. So,
but I mean, these are the bins at fast food places. But I mean, you walk around the city centre, there aren't that many waste bins just around on the street.
No.
You know, there aren't. If you walk, you can walk quite a long way before you see a bin.
Well, a lot of bins have been taken out over the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, I used to be responsible for the bins in Kensington many moons ago, and we had to remove almost all of them because of bomb threats. So when you think about litter bins, you know, they are strategically located, usually outside fast food joints. Actually, the best place is not outside a fast food joint. It should be 150 yards down the road, because that's when you've just finished the fourth bite of your burger and you drop your litter on the floor.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, the city centre landscape is a difficult aesthetic for those that live and work there. And, you know, more bins might work, but most of the shops don't want a bin anywhere near their frontage, because that's encouraging people to litter. Which is a bit odd, but it is. That's the reality, isn't it? You know, we'll throw it at the bin. Oh, well, we missed, never mind. But actually, so you've got to be very careful about what we're asking people to do and whether it works, because, you know, Alice is absolutely right. Your average bin in a fast-moving location is poor quality at best. I don't think that's going to change because there's 20p's on offer.
No.
I don't think so either.
Well, most of the stuff you get from the fast food place isn't going to be included in DRS anyway.
It's not.
No.
You're right.
So, you know, so where do you go? You know, they're all paper cups or plastic cups and wrappers. So, you know, that's a whole different sort of target. So where do you go? And if you put an RVM somewhere, and it's got to be somewhere that's well lit, nice and tidy, so no one rips it off the wall or decides to stuff a brick in it. Or,
that's going to be key. You think about the people that walk, take London, nice sunny day, as it is today. You know, you got a can of whatever, Coke, Sprite on the go. And, you know, it's taking you, 5 minutes to drink it, which means you've got about, 300 yards down the road from the shop. Do you stop and walk back 300 yards to deposit it in the store that's got the RVM, because they sold it, so they should have one? Or do you go, well, where's the next one? I can't see one. And you're looking for a bin, there isn't one. So are you really taking it home or to the train station? I worry about what we're expecting people to do. People don't carry a bag. If they do, have they got a reusable drinking cup? So you're now asking them to have half a dozen used cans in there as well.
The question is, how much do consumers care? But I know you've given statistics that 20% will do things, 60%, and then but how much do they genuinely?
It's really interesting. It is a really interesting thing. So we've done a lot of consumer insight research, and a lot of people, the majority of people, say they want to recycle because they know it helps them do their bit. They are concerned about what's happening with the environment. They want to play their part. They see recycling as one of those easy things that they can do that's going to help make a difference. So they do want to do it. The question then comes, how much do they want to do it? And where are the barriers that are going to make them go, oh, that becomes a little bit too hard. I'm not quite prepared to do that. And that is the challenge.
But do you think if consumers had the option that it was linked to a charitable campaign, that there'll be a higher commitment to doing it? So, for example, you talked about rough people, rough sleepers that are using it to buy their pasty. Well, what if you had an app to say, actually, of the 5 bottles I've recycled, I'll buy that person a pasty? Do you think something like that would work and motivate people to where they've got, hey, I've done my environmental side, but I've also done my social side? It's a tick box. And then organisations like us employ them in our facilities. And that, I would say, would be a really good system that got everybody involved. But is that blue sky thinking?
I think some people will. I think some people will go, yeah, absolutely. That really interests me. Some people will go, honestly, I don't care.
So
You know,
should the DMO board then be talking to all of the national charities for this sort of thing and go, well, actually, guys, do you want to be on the list? You know, because I mean, there could be, you've got an app that's got a choice of 20 charities. Which one? Today, I'm going to do that. Done.
I think anything that triggers emotion in individuals has got a chance of getting behaviour change.
Yeah.
But not everybody's going to respond to those charities, even if it's 20 of them.
Absolutely.
Some of them, it is the financial reward. Some of them, they want it to be as local. It's the local school.
Yeah.
I'm only interested in the local or the community group. So I think whatever we do, you've got to recognise, and Alice talked about this right at the beginning, lots of different stakeholders with lots of different perceptions, they're all being triggered slightly differently. Something like DRS has to recognise that what's going to motivate my mum is different from what would motivate my son.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's what it needs to have, that localized feel, that every local council, local community can say, hey, we can do a beach cleanup, that money will go to our local bits, and here's our RVM for that. This organisation will do it like this. And I think all of that just hasn't been thought about. No. Because everyone's talking about consumer awareness. Well, how are you going to get consumer awareness if you're not evoking any emotion other than, why the hell do I need to pay 20p now? There's another fee, another tax. And that's going to be the immediate response. And it's how you position it. This is an opportunity for us to do all of the following if we work collectively. And that just hasn't, I don't feel that has been thought about just yet.
It's really interesting. So, like I said, I've worked many years in recycling comms, and Adam will be familiar with this too. We always come across people that when you talk to them about what happens in their area, they pay their council tax for potholes and bin collections.
Yep, that's it.
And ultimately that's what it's for.
That's
so
true.
yes, it's how do you then show, okay, it's a bit more than that, but also what you're doing, if it can benefit your local area, they are invested, absolutely invested in what we're going to do.
So you come back to a local DRS collection with a separate bin outside that the scouts come and get.
Yeah, something, who knows, or schools. Most people have got children who are going to a local school, so if you see that benefit
and that 20p will have a lot more value to a young child than to us. So
do you put
£1.20, or
Yeah.
£2.50 I've collected for my school, and that's that behaviour starts. That's your future generations. We start
great education.
Yeah.
Love that. But it's the local that drives that. Absolutely.
So do you put an RVM in the local primary school? So the parents just bring all of that back, and when they take the kids off at school.
Oh, it's an accessibility nightmare, that though, isn't it? Because you can only go in
I'm thinking
school hours.
health and safety.
I mean, it's so, but
it's true. But you've got to have
there's
multiple.
It's got to
touch
work
points.
somehow.
Absolutely.
I mean, we can all come up with the reasons why we can't do it. We've got to come up with the reason why we can.
But I think you're right. I think that's quite critical as well. It's got to be a range of options. But like the messaging, we've got to think about what are people's drivers, and they're going to be different.
Completely.
We can't assume that kind of one size fits all approach.
No. And that's the issue is when it's a mandated legislation, everyone's like, right, 20p. It's the immediate reaction is why, what, and if there's no communication early on to say, well, actually, these are some of the schemes you can start doing. This is how you can start getting involved, and that needs to be part of the early communication.
I remember having a conversation 6 or 7 years ago, when just after the launch of the big sustainable waste management solution for England in particular, Michael Gove, big we will have DRS, we will have consistent collections, I think it was called back then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I remember talking to a couple of research agencies talking about, so what's the answer to DRS? And we were going, what is 20p? And after about half an hour, we worked out that 20p in Surrey is not 20p in Manchester or Glasgow. And actually what drives behaviour is different from geography to geography, socio-demographic group to... And suddenly we were like, so there is no one answer, but you've got a system that's based on one answer. And I think that is a worry, that the trigger point may not be a trigger at all for some geographies or some groups.
And the thing is, I think there needs to be some level of maybe 2 or 3 trial campaigns to say, well, this works. Because otherwise it goes back to your earlier point about consumers need it to be clear, concise. And if we now start saying, well, this is this, and you've got this school's going to be doing the following, or how you get involved could get really convoluted. And I think that could fall flat in its face. And that's why I'm saying, why isn't a trial being done? Saying, let's look at bringing a school, bringing a homeless shelter, trying an RVM, let's use digital, all of that in a key part of a buzzing city or in a rural area. So we've got some comparisons over 6 months to say, before you spend £3 billion on an infrastructure, here's some lessons learned about what is relevant to us right now. I can't understand, I can't comprehend why somebody would do that. You wouldn't buy a car without test driving it. So why are you...
I think politics, unfortunately, has got in the way. I think there's been this commitment, and I think there's an unwillingness to back down on the commitment. And I do worry that if you put a trial in place, it has to work, because too many vested interests are sunk on this debate. So I'm not sure you'd actually get the answer.
But I think a trial would help validate and confirm some of the theory, to say, actually, a schools program, and this is a great schools program, this is what we can launch with to begin with. If you now want to get involved with something else, here is a website, get your local council to do the following, this is what you do here. You've got these options, we're going to have RVMs in these locations, we're going to have digital here. And hey, we're trialing some cool RFID here, where you can walk into that store and it'll scan your bag and away you go. And I think if you can start with 2 or 3 key touch points where you're getting people motivated, and then you start saying, well, actually, this is where it's going to get sexy and cool, where now we'll be able to touch point every other member of society, where we've got a solution that kind of works for everybody. That would work. And I think a trial could if the right stakeholders were there.
Yeah, but you're back to your demographics, like Adam said. 20p in Surrey is different to 20p somewhere else.
Absolutely.
And you are going to get a lot of people that go, I want my 20p back.
Yeah,
and that's never going to change. So there's got to be the option for people to get the money back as well. And it's got to be easy.
It has to be easy.
Yeah.
But if a trial is not feasible in the timescales that we're talking about, is it more that actually when we launch, we're not aiming for optimum after the end of the first year? The
learning.
Absolutely,
Year
you
one, year
learn
two.
through the year as the year goes on.
How do you do that when everyone is
paying the money?
Absolutely.
I don't know. I'll be honest. I do not have the
that
answers.
is a difficult tightrope to walk.
And I think that's the challenge. Is unless you start region by region. I don't know. I mean,
it's like Adam said, that transition period has got to be quick. Yeah. I totally agree. But also, the longer you make it, the easier it is maybe to bed in. So it's a real juggle.
Just don't tell people it's all gone up by 20p and see if they notice.
Stealth.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah. I mean, if you went and bought something, do you check the price every time?
No.
Exactly.
And actually, the research we did way back in the day suggested that people wouldn't know or not know if that was 20p. Should you label that as a deposit or not? I think it's a really interesting place to be.
Yeah.
And in terms of what your thoughts around DRS and EPR going live at the same time?
Oh, don't get me started. Suez and a lot of the waste management companies as a whole have argued and positioned for a long time that with so much transition, and I'm going to say some pain points, because there's a lot of different materials, a lot of rapid transitioning happening right now. We'd argue that, if you could embed EPR properly over the next couple of years, and you've got consistent collections or simpler recycling working in tandem, we'll know in about 2 years' time just how efficient all of those capture mechanisms are for the target materials. If you're getting 85% capture of target bottles or whatever packaging type you want to think about, then there is no justification then for a DRS for those materials. And I would argue that opens the door for DRS for materials that we would argue are harder to capture or more problematic. And I would go batteries and possibly textiles, things that aren't naturally going to fit in a curbside system that you've already got. And if we could buy ourselves time to understand how EPR and simpler recycling are working, it also gives you your time to go and run some trials around what DRS would trigger or not trigger. For me, why spend an awful lot more money now for very little gain potentially when we could understand what works and what doesn't work? And I think that's am I being pragmatic? Oh, who knows? But I just think it's a sense of, you're asking my MRFs to do 2 things in parallel. One's expand the material stream. The other ones restrict the material stream. I'm not quite sure how you deal with that transition and it's only 12 months between one happening and the other. That's a terribly difficult thing to budget for.
I mean, our local collection have just announced that they'll take batteries if you put them in a bag on top of the container bin. When you put the containers bin out, put a bag on top, then they'll take those separate. Great. You know, that's just come out of nowhere. We got this note that said, oh, by the way, from next week, we'll be collecting batteries. Please put them in a bag on top of your bin. And you go, okay. You know, which is great, but no one's mentioned it. It's never, I mean, it's when they first went away from commingled and we had a fibre bin and a containers bin, the bin turned up 3 days before the letter telling me I was going to get a bin.
Nice.
So all these bins turned up.
It was Christmas.
What are these for? You know, but it's great. I mean, I remember working with one of the guys from Australia. He came over and he said they had the same thing in Sydney. He said that he went out with the crews to watch this and there was all these bags of batteries on top. So they're opening the lid and putting the batteries inside, shut the bin, then put it in the back. He went, that's not really the idea, guys, you know. So he said there's a little bit of training. But as you say, you know, that would be a really good one too, because everyone's concerned about batteries because it's, you know, especially lithium batteries. So yeah, set that up. You know, that's something they've got to go somewhere.
I think that's a really good point that Adam makes, that the change that people are having to focus on at the moment. We spend a lot of time helping our members understand what they need to do for EPR currently, and what those changes mean, and then adding on top of that the other things that are coming as well. They've got a hell of a lot to deal with at the moment, and they're just kind of very focused on what's happening now, not necessarily looking ahead. I know it's 2 years, not that far,
Time flies.
but also they've got so much to deal with at the moment that it's a real challenge. It's again, it comes down to that messaging, doesn't it? It's being really clear what the MRFs have to do, what the producers have to do, what us as householders have to do, what are our responsibilities.
And then you come back, as what you said earlier, once you've got this material, where does it go? What do you do with it? Because, you know, we all get the same, you know, people, oh, can you recycle this? Yes, you can, but not commercially. Well, can you, everything can be recycled, but you have to be in the right place. And so, you know, you're going to start recycling things that you can't recycle or you can't do it effectively. So that's going to stop. Then where does it go? Well, we can't burn it because, well, what do we do with it? And it's, you know, you go around in this big circular loop of going, what's next? You know, or make everything, and then you get the people, make everything out of one type of plastic and that's not a problem. Like, yeah, that's okay. But then you've got to talk to the manufacturers and make all the other plastics. You know? There's no perfect answer to anything.
And in terms of, you know, we just talked about a potential DRS that could take batteries and other items. As a technology provider, are you guys looking at systems that could accommodate that in the future? Because it's all great. I mean, I think it's really important if we can get people into recycling and into this great behaviour, and DRS with bottles and cans is that starting point. What's stopping it growing into other products?
We've looked. I mean, batteries in MRFs are the bane of everyone's life.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, people say, you know, can you not put something on a conveyor belt that detects the batteries and eject? Yes, we can. But most of them catch fire in the tipping hall before it gets into the system. Once it's in the system, it's easy to find. But when they're being dragged across the floor by a front end shovel, that's when they fire. You know, keep them separate. Do a separate collection. You know, if we're going to do a separate collection for film, let's do one for batteries. It's not that hard. People will get on board with that really easy because it's like, well, I've got this little bag. They're not smelly. They're not untidy. You can keep them on the side. You know, nobody has that many batteries. You know, collect them once a month. Put your bag out, and it's done. So it's there's a technology to do it, but you can over-engineer something. Just keep it simple. It's like you said. If it's simple, people will do it. If all of a sudden, I've got to do that to do this, and then I just put it in that bin. Someone will sort it out, and that's the problem. There's a lot of things coming out at once. There's a lot of legislation. There's a lot of changes. Like you said, people are just trying to focus on what they're having to do now. They can't think about what's next because they're not sure how they're going to do what they're supposed to be doing now. So once you've got your head around that, then what's next? You know.
I have a very positive approach to it all. Talked earlier about having a naivety around legislation, about being quite excited when it comes and what can come out of it. And I do think there's a real opportunity that we will get, you know, some positive results out of this, and that we can improve the situation that we're in at the moment.
I think the DRS can, if played right, can unite all of us properly, different stakeholders, charities. And if it's done correctly, as I said, it could be a once-in-a-generation policy. The question right now is, you know, when and how do we bring all of us together to make sure when it goes live in 2027, it has the most highest chance of success.
Yes.
And it's not just a lip service policy that flops.
I mean, the other thing on the back of that, as Adam said, having a lot of MRFs, all of a sudden, 2 of your highest value materials are going to go. So the MRF then, how does it actually cover its costs? Because, it's lost a massive amount of money. It's sort of 7 figures a year. So, so the reinvestment in the MRF to keep that going isn't going to happen because you haven't got the return on the material coming in to actually make it. So it's a bit of a catch-22. If you do a system that's absolutely fantastic, but you kill a system that was working, or make it less profitable, so then there's got to be some happy medium somewhere. So.
I agree. I mean, the conversation I had earlier with Larac, I mean, they're hugely concerned about the revenue loss of these precious materials, and like right now it works. So how are we going to navigate this? And there's so many questions that haven't been challenged, and ultimately that's predominantly where the recycling happens at home. And
someone told me recently, they said, well, don't worry if aluminium goes, because we'll be taking in film. And you go, because that's worth a fortune. It's like, so we do something that's far more complicated to recycle and is really, really mixed, but we've lost the aluminium, which is worth billions. Okay, thanks.
I think the experience of EPR and simpler recycling is interesting because it was very late in the day that you started to get the guidance, the guidelines, the frequently asked questions, the updated information flows, so that businesses were ready to react. And we're still, flowing that material out now because so many businesses still aren't doing it properly or don't know what they're supposed to do. And I guess the lack of information that we're all discussing now around DRS, part of me thinks, well, government knew how to do it last time, lastminute.com and through the kitchen sink. Maybe they're ramping up in a similar vein that, the 6 months before, suddenly all that information becomes available. I just worry that won't be long enough for a lot of the transitioning planning that we're talking about, the infrastructure. Can we access enough RVMs? We all know how difficult they're going to be.
Yeah.
Can we get all of the ancillary vehicles ready? The answer is going to be, just as we said to government around EPR and simpler recycling, we need 2, maybe 3 years to get most of the infrastructure you need in place when we're certain that it's happening. And at the moment, there's a lot of uncertainty. So no, we're not investing heavily on the things we need for 2027, 28, because you haven't locked it. And I think, I'm not sure that they fully understand that we all live in a commercial world that's global.
Yeah.
And we're not the only ones asking for those vehicles or asking for the bins or the RVMs.
Yeah.
There's other parts of the world that are out there doing exactly the same. I think we have to be conscious as a system that transition time frame cannot be shortened much beyond 2 years in reality.
I mean, we, as a company, we worked with the EQ and built the sorting facility in Montreal because, this has all been collected, as we were saying earlier. Once it's collected, it's got to go somewhere, be counted again so that you know what the tonnage you've got, where it's coming from. So and that's got to then be baled and shipped to end market because having bags full of material has to go somewhere. So if you don't build that to start with, I was talking to someone, they said, I said, you need a sorting facility for this material to go to, or more than one. You do it in regions where it all comes in, so you cut down the transport. So, you're effectively building a aluminium and PET MRF. And then, we'll just send it to a MRF. I went, okay, so you've just taken this material off someone. You're going to take it to him and ask him to bale it. I said that'll probably cost you about £1,000 a tonne then. You've got to have the end market, who it's going to go to. Then how does he want it? He wants it baled. So how do we get it baled? And then go back, the collection is not the point. The collection is the last bit you set up, because as soon as you start collecting it, it needs to flow through a system and go and made back into, fizzy drink cans and fizzy water bottles. If you haven't got that in place, you're going to sit with tons of it. Go, well, where's it go? We'll sell it where we used to sell it, and the whole thing just dies on its head.
Well, thank you all for your opinions on DRS. I think I like you, Alice. I'm very pro the DRS. I think it's something that's well needed, but I think we're all aligned with the fact that there's a lot more work to be done. And I look forward to working with you guys over the next few years, seeing how it all pans out and rolls out. So thank you all for your opinions today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thanks very much.
Brilliant.